For City Council. Oh, repeating. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Mayor Candell is not here tonight, so I'm Vice Mayor Catherine Way and taking over tonight for the agenda items. We also have our council member Kevin Carroll is on Zoom and he is with us, so we have a quorum. At this point, I would like to have a roll call.
Councilmember Carroll,
Present.
Councilmember Paulson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Way.
Here, could, for those who can, please stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This is for matters that are not listed on the agenda. It's time for a member of the public who is either in person with us, to address the city council on regarding items that are not on the agenda and are not listed on the consent calendar. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to engage with us in public comment? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment, but I would also like to reference a submitted document that was on public comment, which is available on our agenda packet online. Thank you, Allison, for posting that. And it's available for the public to read, and it's on our online agenda. Item 3, presentation or proclamation. Today we have the National Community Survey results presented from Polco. And who will be presenting that? Oh, hello, Ms. O'Hare. And for those in the audience, I think there is one printout. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, Vice Mayor Way, members of the City Council. My name is Shannon O'Hare and I'm the Assistant City Manager. I have just a brief overview of the presentation tonight that will be done by representatives of Polco. So as part of the city's ongoing efforts to engage with the community, the city participated in the Polco survey, previously called the National Community Survey, for the second time following our previous participation in 2021. The results of the 2021 survey were presented at the March 16th, 2022 City Council meeting for anyone who's interested in perusing the archives. The National Community Survey serves as a vital tool for gathering resident feedback on various aspects of life within Larkspur. In fall of 2023, the survey was sent to a representative sample for residents asking for their opinions of various facets of living in Larkspur. By participating in this survey, Larkspur can compare its results with that of over 600 municipalities nationwide. And additionally, the survey allows for the city to analyze changes in Larkspur resident opinions over time. A representative of Polco is here with us tonight virtually to provide an overview of the survey and present the results to the council and the community.
Hello, welcome.
Good evening. Am I coming through all right? Can you hear me?
Sure are.
Perfect. See, going to share my screen. It looks like my screen is unable to be shared. I didn't know if
Sorry about that. Let me enable it. One moment.
no worries.
It should be available now.
Kevin, are you able to see that okay? Yes, just give me a thumbs up if you're able to see it okay. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And is the PowerPoint coming through all right?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and get going here. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Joe DeLilio. I'm a senior survey associate here at Polco National Research Center, and I'm delighted to be presenting the National Community Survey results to you this evening. Before I begin, on behalf of myself and my Polco National Researcher co-workers, I'd like to thank Colby Gleason, our primary contact throughout the survey development and implementation process. They provided thoughtful and detailed feedback throughout this project. I also like to acknowledge my colleague, Alyssa Punwar, who was Larkspur's project manager this year's survey and did the bulk of the work of this important project. Very excited to be here from our headquarters here in Madison, Wisconsin. I was able to work with Larkspur in the previous iteration of the NCS, so especially excited to be able to look over and talk through this data with you this evening. A little bit about us. Polko's online community engagement polling platform provides the information tools that local governments and other public sector leaders need. Now, hundreds of organizations nationwide use Polko for strategic planning, budgeting, and empowering resident voices. We make civil verified community engagement online not only possible, but we strive to make it as accessible as possible as well. NRC and Polko merged in 2019 to more effectively serve local government and project resident voices. And a little bit about NRC, or National Research Center. National Research Center at Polko gives local governments and other public sector organizations the data they need to make more informed decisions. Since 1994, we've worked with hundreds of jurisdictions nationwide, and we also do have longstanding partnerships with ICMA, National League of Cities, as well as ELGL and others. And before diving into results, I want to emphasize that there are a variety of ways that these results can be used. Most commonly, the jurisdictions we work with use their survey data to monitor trends in resident opinion over time, measure government performance and ratings of public trust, and to inform the budgeting processes and strategic plans. Our results also allow you to benchmark your community's specific characteristics and services against those same characteristics within other communities in our benchmark database. Our hope is that these findings as presented will spur ideas for what we can use with these results, but also areas that we might want to dig in a little bit deeper. And the National Community Survey, or the NCS as I'll most commonly refer to it as, is a standardized 5-page comprehensive survey that allows municipalities to assess resident opinion about their community and local government. The NCS focuses on the livability of Larkspur by categorizing survey questions from 10 main facets of community livability, as shown here. These facets have been those that are identified through extensive survey research as those that are most impactful to residents' quality of life. The NCS includes items within each of these 10 facets of community livability to provide a full picture on how residents feel about their community. Finally, these facets also tend to align with municipal departments, making it easier for city staff to quickly find the information that's most important to them in that final report of results. And this brings us to this iteration of the NCS. And all households within Larkspur were eligible to participate in the survey. A list of all households within the zip code servicing Larkspur were purchased based on updated listings from the U.S. Postal Service. And using GIS boundary files provided by the city, addresses located outside of Larkspur boundaries were removed from that list of potential households. We geocoded each of those addresses to make sure that they were within the defined boundaries of the city of Larkspur. From that list, we have a proprietary process from which we pulled 3,000 addresses randomly, and these were the folks that were selected to receive the survey. The 3,000 randomly selected households received mailings beginning on September 25th, 2023, and the survey remained open for 6 weeks. The first mailing was a postcard inviting households to participate in the survey, followed a week later by a cover letter and physical survey with postage paid return envelope so they could respond to that as well. Each mailer, both the postcard as well as the physical survey packet, included a URL and QR code to respond online. So each participant had the option for that. And we did include language on all mailers for anybody who had already responded to the survey to please not respond twice. The survey was available in both English and Spanish, and all mailings also included paragraphs in both languages instructing participants on how to complete the survey in their preferred language. With those 3,000 mailers, a total of 526 surveys were received back from these efforts, providing a response rate of around 20% and a margin of error plus or minus 4 percentage points. This is actually above average in terms of response rate. Really, we do look to that margin of error as survey researchers as that being the more important of the two. We generally see about a 15% response rate, so this 20% is over that. And we generally shoot for at least a 5% margin of error. So that 4% margin of error on Larkspur's project is also lower, which means that there's less error to be considered in each of those data points. Along with this information, we compared the demographic profile of survey respondents to that of adults in Larkspur using the most recent census and the American Community Survey data, and we weighted these results. So that means that we were able to consider some responses more than others, slightly so. So we get a good representative look into the demographics that make up Larkspur as a whole. In addition to the randomly selected probability sample of households, a link to an online community-wide open participation survey was publicized by the city. This open participation survey was open to all city residents and became available on October 23rd, 2023. This remained open for 2 full weeks, and there were 132 responses received. This presentation and the report are based on those 526 responses from the random sample. And responses to the open participation survey are provided separately in that report of results. And one of the advantages that local government have in participating in the community-wide survey is the opportunity to compare ratings given by your residents to those in communities across the U.S. This was born out of the observation that there are just some areas that tend to score higher. For example, we'll say fire services. And there are some areas that tend to score lower overall, we'll say street-related services. So instead of pitting fire services against those street-related services, we're able to compare the fire services in Larkspur to fire services in communities across the nation, and same with those street-related services in Larkspur, making sure that we have like comparisons. We currently have over 500 communities in this database, and Larkspur was compared to that complete database that we have available at this time. Now moving into an overview of survey results. In the survey, we do ask 2 questions that directly relate to these 10 facets of community livability. The first of which asks residents to rate the overall quality of these facets of livability. You can see the resulting comparison to the national benchmark here with that shading. And this will be a similar layout for the rest of the presentation and mirrors similarly the report as well. So we can see those that are in the tan color are higher than the national benchmarks. Similar is green, lower if we had any would be pink. And in that second question that directly asks about these same 10 facets of community livability is then centered on the importance that residents place on these for the city to focus on in the coming 2 years. So we asked both about the quality and the importance of these facets. And we use this data to create what I think is the aptly named quality and importance matrix. And we use this chart, which is also included in the report, to help determine which of those areas that are, relatively speaking, higher in importance and lower in quality. Those would be located here on that right-hand bottom quadrant that has been starred. And this chart is just one of the many ways that we can interpret the data, used to identify key findings and help a community determine which areas may need additional focus or resource allocation in the coming years. I can also point to areas that we believe are doing very well. Specifically, I'll point to that upper right-hand quadrant where we see parks and recreation, economy, and safety. These are the facets of livability that are both high in importance and high in quality, and just as much as those areas that we believe may require more focus or areas that could be potentially focused on just as much we want to look at those areas that are high in importance and quality. Now moving into those comparisons to the national benchmarks, of the 122 survey items for which residents provided evaluative ratings, 30 of these received ratings higher than the national benchmark. The vast majority were similar to the national benchmark, 85 of these were similar, and 7 received ratings that were lower to the national benchmarks. Ratings are considered similar if they're within 10 points of the national average, and they'd be considered either higher or lower if they're more than 10 points different from the average. Along the same lines, if there were 20 points or more, or beyond 10 points and 20 points, it would be much higher than the national benchmark. And if it was same on the back end, it would be much lower than the national benchmark.
Before you move on, I'd like to ask you a question about one of your pieces here.
Certainly.
Because we scored lower on the residents' connection and engagement with their community on page 4, and we also scored kind of on the bottom left side of the diagram with that same one. Do you have a definition of what engagement is?
That's a wonderful question. And for us, that definition would be the outreach that they receive from the city, but also that engagement would be availability of opportunities to engage with other folks within the community. So that could certainly be interpreted as opportunities outside of that outreach to engage with other members within that community as well.
So it's broader than just how the city engages or has communication with residents.
Yes, correct. It's generally in that idea, but certainly could be viewed as residents take the survey in that broader sense as well.
Okay. Keep going. Thank you.
Oh, I think we had another.
Pardon me, Kevin, Councilmember Carroll also has his hand raised.
Certainly.
Yeah, I two questions. I noticed under selecting survey recipients, it says we sampled at a rate of 5 to 3 compared to single family housing. And I'm wondering how you came up with that number, because I've been under the impression we're about 48 to 52% of our community are rental housing, as opposed to single family homes. And then I have one other question.
Yes, another wonderful question. Thank you, Council Member. The reason that we tend to oversample those single-family homes, or excuse me, those multifamily homes compared to multifamily homes, is that we tend to hear more from those that are in the single-family homes. So that's why we generally target multifamily more in that proportion of 5 to 3. We're able to do that weighting on the back end for a number of the demographics, and so we can make up for any of those groups that we tend to hear from higher than what we would expect to see looking at the census, for example. So that just allows us to get ahead of that observation that we have that those in single-family housing tend to respond at a higher rate than those in multifamily housing, and we're able to target that multifamily housing a little bit more on the onset.
Okay. And then in the listing of services, I noticed library is not really defined as a separate category. It's been a big issue for us and will be for a while. So I'm wondering, is it kind of lumped into park and recreation or education and arts?
That's a wonderful question as well. You're correct. That is part of the education, arts, and culture, I believe.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for now.
Certainly. Beautiful. That brings us to, along with those national benchmarks, as we have that historical data from the previous iteration of the NCS, we also have those results that we can compare to. And when compared to Larkspur's NCS results from 2021, we see very similar proportions About 25 items were higher or more positive in 2023. The vast majority were similar. About 113 items were similar to 2021, and we had 10 items that were lower than the previous iteration of the NCS. And before moving into key findings, one of the things I always like to note is that these are the items that stood out to us as interesting as survey researchers. Y'all, being the experts of Larkspur in the community, will definitely have other key findings to pull out of this. And there are many, many things to be gleaned as we move through the data. That being said, our first key finding is that Larkspur's economy remains a valued community feature, while residents indicate some areas of focus. And about 81% of residents assess the overall economic health of the city as excellent or good, which was down about 6% from 2021, but continued to score above national benchmark comparisons. Larkspur as a place to visit received above average evaluations from roughly 9 in 10 residents, while 8 in 10 favorably rated the overall quality of business and service establishments. 3/4 were pleased with the vibrancy of Larkspur's downtown and commercial area, exceeding national benchmarks, and about 7 in 10 residents positively reviewed Larkspur as a place to work. Approximately 28% of residents positively rated employment opportunities, which was an 8% decline from 2021, ranking below comparison communities and indicating a potential area of focus. Additionally, the cost of living scores remained low, with only about 1 in 10 residents rating this as excellent or good. When asked about what impact, if any, the economy would likely have on their family income in the next 6 months, around 19% of residents expected that income to be somewhat or very positive. This is a 13% drop from 2021, yet still on par with the national benchmark. Before moving on to our next section, this is something that I do want to note, especially in that cost of living as well as economic impact. Looking at the national level, this is something that we've seen in nearly all communities that we've worked with. There have been a few outliers here and there, but there's growing concern for the cost of living as well as that overall impact the economy will have on family income. Again, in nearly all communities that we've worked with in the past 6 months to a year. Our second key finding, most residents feel a strong sense of safety in Larkspur. And nearly all residents said that they felt very or somewhat safe in their neighborhoods during the day and in Larkspur's downtown and commercial areas during the day. Similarly, a very strong portion, about 9 in 10, reported feeling safe from violent crime, scoring higher than national benchmark comparisons, while about 3/4 felt safe from property crime. About 66% of residents reported feeling safe from fire, flood, or other natural disaster, which was a 7% increase from 2021. Approximately 9 in 10 gave positive reviews to fire services, ambulance, or other emergency medical services, as well as fire prevention and education. And emergency preparedness, as well as police sheriff services, received similarly favorable valuations, with the former scoring higher than comparison communities. About 9 in 10 residents also positively reviewed crime prevention, as well as animal control. And in a custom question that the city asked, when asked how interested folks were in receiving information from the city of Larkspur in each of the following areas, at least half of residents expressed strong interest in receiving additional information about emergency and disaster preparedness. 58% of folks responded as being very interested, as well as crime prevention, about 53% from this group as well. This indicates that safety does remain at top of mind for Larkspur residents, even with those high scores that we saw in those previous slides. Our third key finding, residents continue to appreciate Larkspur's natural environment and recreational opportunities. And here we see a number of strong scores with a number of these items, again, scoring higher than national benchmarks. About 95% of residents gave excellent or good reviews to the overall quality of natural environment in the city. Roughly 9 in 10 offered positive evaluations for the city's cleanliness, air quality, as well as preservation of natural areas and open space. And additionally, approximately 8 in 10 favorably rated water resources, which was a 6% increase from 2021, as well as yard waste pickup and recycling services. Moving over into the parks and recreation side, nearly 9 in 10 residents were pleased with the overall quality of parks and recreation opportunities, the availability of paths and walking trails at city parks, as well as fitness opportunities, while a slightly lower yet very strong proportion also favorably rated overall recreation opportunities. And looking at these custom questions again, additionally, 70% of residents deemed protecting natural resources to be a high priority for the city over the next 2 years. This item ranking higher than other potential community initiatives, reinforcing the value that residents place on the local environment. Our fourth key finding, while many aspects of mobility are on the rise, community members support additional focus in this area. Nearly 9 in 10 participants offered positive evaluations of the ease of travel by bicycle as well as walking, both rating much higher than the national communities across the country. About 7 in 10 residents favorably rated the overall quality of the transportation system, which was again above the national average, as well as the ease of travel by car, which was in line with the national benchmarks, but experienced a 6% increase from 2021. Traffic enforcement, which was 63% excellent or good, showed the most significant increase, trending up by 12%. And street repair, which was 61% positive. Sidewalk maintenance, street lighting also improved slightly from prior results as well. Approximately 8 in 10 residents indicated that they had walked or biked instead of driving within the past year, similar to 2021 scores, but much higher than the national benchmark comparisons. Roughly 4 in 10 reported having used public transportation instead of driving, which was also a 9% increase from 2021 results. And again, looking at the custom question that the city asked the community, about half of respondents also deemed improving traffic flow to be a high priority for the city, while slightly fewer emphasized maintaining and improving city roads and improving public transportation. And along with that, just quick note, was improving downtown parking at 23% as well. And we did cover some of the custom questions that were asked in this iteration of the NCS, but again, just touching on the fact that the NCS does have space where community can add questions of current topical or policy interest. And I'd like to go over a couple of those questions that we weren't able to cover in some of those other sections. First of which one thing do you like most about living in Larkspur? And when asked this question, when asked what one thing do folks like most about living in the city, overwhelmingly we saw that the overall quality of life was the area that folks responded with the most. Followed proportionally by proximity to friends and family, natural resources, outdoor recreation, as well as the small town feel that the city still has. And then slightly lower proportions, proximity to job, folks that grew up in the area, schools, retail or dining options, character of the community, convenient transportation, and affordability. But again, very strongly we saw folks saying the overall quality of life. And looking through the summary of conclusions, again, I'd just like to reiterate, this is what stood out to us as interesting as survey researchers. Many, many other highlights to be gleaned, especially as y'all being the experts of the community. And as y'all go through and parse this data, a couple things that we find helpful to frame this is looking at this in areas that we might have expected, looking through the data and what findings were surprising, and then other areas that we might want to dig in deeper and focus on. And the online version of the survey was hosted on Polko. After completing the community survey online, residents were asked if they'd like to join the Polko panel. And if you'd like to dig in deeper to find out more on opinions and perceptions of residents, you can continue to engage with these folks on Polko. We work to make it as easy as possible to engage with these folks, share new questions through social media, email, or in-person events. And we already do have nearly 1,000 folks that have responded to Larkspur surveys in the past and have already signed up and would like to be notified with any follow-up questions that the city may have. And certainly I'd like to stop here for any questions, and I'd be more than happy to flip through the presentation to any data points of interest.
Thank you very much. So I'll return this to my council members and ask if they would like to begin with any questions. Councilmember Carroll, do you have any additional questions?
Yeah, I do. I was struck by 52% were interested in more affordable housing. And I was wondering if there was a breakdown between single-family homeowners and apartment renters in that number. Is that available, or is that something we have to ask in the future?
And that's a wonderful question as well. So we do include demographic crosstabs. That is only available in the online version of the report, just due to the interactive nature of that. But along with the type of housing that folks live in, we do ask demographic questions such as age, race and ethnicity, and all questions are available to be broken down by those demographic crosstabs in the online version of the report.
Okay, because where it gets complicated, I realize is I think we're in the process of a generational change where we have a lot of seniors whose housing costs might be very relatively cheap because they've either paid off their mortgages or at the tail end of what was a low rate mortgage when they initially rented, versus our newer residents who are coming in at obviously much higher prices and much higher, at least at this time, interest rates. So I'm curious about that area. The other thing that jumped out at me was 7% responding that it was convenient to their job, but numbers I've seen show that only about 4% of our residents actually work in Marin. So they're commuting either to San Francisco, the East Bay. It used to be traditionally San Francisco. But now there's more work at home 2 or 3 days a week. They don't have to go in as often. And I'm just curious how much of a factor that is, and that differentiation between the 7% that think it's convenient versus the 4% who might actually work in Marin. Because we do have not so much traffic problems going into the city that we used to have, but certainly the East Bay is an issue, both for incoming and outgoing workers. So it's just an area I would like to see more detail on at some point.
Maybe that question could be added at our next time this survey is done.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Anything, Councilmember Paulson?
Yeah, thanks. Just a brief clarification. So 526 people were randomly sampled, and then there was the 132, which sounded like they were non-random volunteer. Any differentiation? Because I'm making the assumption that people who write in are often engaged and vocal, and sometimes for people sitting at the dais create a bit of a bias because they highlight issues that are not necessarily in the random sample. Any summary of that, or was that at all analyzed?
That's a wonderful question as well. Something that I would like to follow up on, if possible. We have that data in the report. We don't generally do, or not always, do we do a side-by-side comparison for the random sample and open participation, although I'd be more than happy to pull that up, have some analysis and provide some feedback on that.
Okay. And then what you were saying about some of the other, cross correlations, like Councilmember Carroll's question about, apartment versus homeowners, is that something staff has? So they have access to, some analytic tools to do those dimensional analyses?
Yes, that should be included in the online version of the report that was sent over. Though we do have the ability, if staff would like that raw version of the data to do any custom analysis, we should be able to send that over by
Okay.
as well.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question or comment about this item? Yes, please join us, state your name and your question.
Hi, Claire Paquette, Larkspur City Council candidate. I was wondering, in the online analysis, is there a way to see I don't know where to look. Is there a way to see the results based on neighborhood? Because we have some pretty defined neighborhoods in Larkspur that might have different engagement on each question.
Thank you.
Yes. Another great question. That's
We have
something.
great questions in our community.
Well, something as an aside, if I may, I really enjoy the questions. Sometimes we don't have any questions. So it just shows how engaged the city is, both on the council level as well as folks that are listening in. So very much appreciated. That's a great question. We do have the ability to track sub areas. Off the top of my head, I apologize. I can't remember if we tracked districts over neighborhoods.
I think Shannon has a
Shannon may
response.
be
I'll
able to-
interject. We do have different quadrants of the cities that are tracked as part of Polko, but they might not be what our residents think of as neighborhoods, because we have lots of distinct neighborhoods in Larkspur.
Yeah.
And the sample size can get small enough to where there's both concerns about if a couple folks answered, it's all weighted, so different parts of the city are represented. But it can almost be a few blocks of what Larkspur thinks of as a neighborhood, to where the number of respondents, it'll be weighted in a way to where it'll look a little bit funky. And then there also are concerns about anonymity
Okay.
when you get into very small neighborhoods, so that folks can feel that they're participating in a survey, and that, we're not looking at what did this one apartment complex respond? What did this one street, next to a project respond, et cetera. So it might not be as granular as the real data nerds would like, but there's good reasons for that.
Okay. Thank you. Did that help? Great. Any
No.
other audience question? All right. I think that closes this item. Is there any follow-up you want to tell us, Ms. O'Hare, about what we're going to do following up with this?
Staff uses this on an ongoing basis, especially as we participate over the years. It's very helpful both to see how we're doing on our own benchmarks against other communities, and also what's going on at a given point in time. So an example I'll draw from this is that folks had a different feelings about the economy in Larkspur. That doesn't surprise me based on consumer confidence in general, interest rates, et cetera. That's good for staff to know. Over time, though, if we look at if we've really gone down relative to how we were before, as well as if we're far below other communities, it's just helpful to know. And also, this is one of the things every time we do this survey that I like to drive home, is that this is a professionally designed survey that use scientific survey methods. And that comes from everything from how folks are sampled, how questions are designed, et cetera. And that all may seem very easy, but it's very intensive. And it's harder to do right than you might think. So it's nice for us to have that. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the questions.
And it sounded like we did this 2 years ago. Is there a plan for 2 years from now, or do we have that yet?
We'll get there when we get there, but
Okay.
there's the soft plan that for Larkspur every other year would be good for benchmarking purposes.
Okay, great. All right, well, we'll close this item if there's no more comment. Any other comment, Councilmember Carroll? Great.
No, just in the 1 and 2 years, it would be nice if we could break out library,
Okay,
because I think that's going to be a big positive for us. And rather than see it lumped in with other things,
And we do have the ability to update. Polko asks us every time, both a couple of custom questions we're able to get, as well as slight changes to the survey. Again, the goal is to benchmark against the 400 plus communities who participate, but we are able to tweak it, and we do revisit it each time. So that's good.
yeah.
to know.
And I'm
Great.
if I was around for it, I'd be very curious to see numbers about the library in 2 years.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, sir, and have a nice evening off in Wisconsin or wherever you're calling in from. Okay, bye-bye. We're on to number 4, which is approval of the consent calendar. Is there any of my fellow council people who would like to remove an item for the consent calendar for discussion? We lost Kevin. Maybe we can get him back. Hold on a moment, people. There he
Sure.
goes. Hi.
I,
I just asked if there's any item on the consent calendar that a council member would like removed, and I see no. All right, I'll accept a motion for the consent calendar.
So moved.
second,
And could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carroll,
yes,
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes. All right, number 5, city manager's oral report.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor and council members. This evening, I wanted to make sure the public is aware that the county now has launched what they call the Public Emergency Portal. So a website that has a lot of great information about anything that's going on in the county that might be of concern to folks that might fall under the umbrella of a public emergency. And under that website, there's a tab called mitigation, and that's what I wanted to draw people's attention to. And I'll give the website address in a sec. The cities in the county work collaboratively with some of our special districts to update the countywide hazard mitigation plan, and that process is about to launch again. And so it is at this point placed on the web that the public will have the opportunity to review the draft plan and provide feedback. And so strongly encourage people to visit this website. So the emergency portal is emergency.marincounty.org. And the tab to click on is mitigation. So you can read about the multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plan. And then as you scroll through the page, you'll have an opportunity to review various maps and then provide feedback, and strongly encourage folks to participate. And we'll probably add something to our website to direct people there. Oh, it is on the homepage. See, there you go. That's my report tonight.
And I think just to reiterate, is that is not for preparation type of information, which is on readymarin.org's website. This is the emergency portal for real-time updates on emergencies that may be happening in real time. So road closure, mudslide, something like that. The readymarin.org is for preparation and getting prepared for those things, which are two separate things. And lastly, what I understand about the hazard mitigation plan is that they're phasing it in several cities at a time. And it's now our cycle is arriving for Larkspur and our area. So you can weigh in on those things. And I see that my fellow council members weighing in right now on that. So great. Any questions of the city manager's report? Okay, that moves us to number 6, council members' reports and comments. I'll begin with Councilmember Carroll. If you have anything, nothing this week. Thank you. Councilmember Paulson.
Nope, nothing.
Okay, and I'll move on to number 7, public hearings. We have none. And 8, we have 2 business items tonight. 8.1 is a discussion regarding outdoor dining fee. So we are to receive, the council is to receive staff report and public input and consider directing staff to return with an item to amend the outdoor dining fee in the city's adopted fee schedule. I'll just refer everyone to the on agenda packet, which has some materials. And there's also, for those in the audience, there's a handout that's been published in the back. So it looks like Public Works Director is here, so you can begin.
Yes, good evening, Vice Mayor Way, members of council, Julian Skinner, Public Works Director. So we have for you tonight a discussion on our outdoor dining policy. This is a continuation of several meetings that we've had starting back in 20 and 21 regarding a parklet policy, and then ultimately you adopted a parklet policy and a fee to go along with that. And then we were before you in December of last year, in November of last year, where there was a conversation about the adopted fee and whether we should revisit that fee. And so we, at that time, said we would come back in February and have a conversation. And so we're here tonight to have that conversation with you and invite public comment. And then if there is a desire to amend that fee, then we'll be looking for that direction from you tonight, and we would return at a subsequent meeting to amend the city's adopted fee for parklets. This is a highlight of the main points of our parklet policy. There were 2 items that we had highlighted at the November meeting last year. That we said we would come back with. One was the fee that is charged. And the other was the restriction that the outdoor dining could only be on Magnolia Avenue. And so we're back tonight to talk about the fee, and then also to show you our one potential thought for expanding the area so that the parklets and the outdoor dining are not restricted only to Magnolia Avenue. Again, the fee that we're talking about here is not a cost recovery fee. This is a rental. This is the use of public space for private purposes. That's how it was set up as we adopted it. In our fee schedule, it is set at the discretion of the city engineer to resemble the market rate for similar uses in that area. So what we have done in the one parklet that we did approve when the fee was in effect was we looked at the going rates for shops in the downtown, and at that time we arrived at a dollar figure of $4 per square foot per month. And the way that we have that fee schedule set up now, as I'll show you on the next slide, is we only have the one fee for use of public space. This is the same slide. This has not been updated. It's only a few months old from the research we did back in November of what other agencies are charging for outdoor dining. So ours is highlighted in red there. And this is based on, for reference, the amount of space that it would be an outdoor parking space. Again, the outdoor dining is on the sidewalk, not in the parking space, but this all, the evolution was through parklets. So that's kind of a standard to compare fees from agency to agency. We're looking at renting about one parking space size of the sidewalk, and that's about $640 a square foot based on the city's current fee as adopted. And then you can see here, there's some others, some lower, a few higher, and some of those were just set as a number arbitrarily at $1 a square foot. Some of them did do a market analysis similar to how our rate is set, and others based it off of lost parking revenue for cities that have parking meters that could use that measurement.
Julian, is there any state guidelines for this by law? How much is the minimal amount? Do we know?
To my knowledge,
There
the
isn't any?
city attorney may want to weigh in, but there's no statutes or anything.
Okay.
This is, we can set what the rental fee is, and then it's at your discretion to determine if there's an offset to that fee to assign it to be something different.
But there's no case. Sky, is there any case law that says a minimum amount, or is there?
There is no case law that says a minimum amount. Ultimately, if the city council decided that it wanted to provide a full subsidy for the value of the rental use of the property, it could do that. There are provisions in the California Constitution added by Proposition 26 that specify that rental of government property is not a type of charge that is subject to a cap for the city's costs of providing the service or providing the property. So there really isn't an upper limit either, other than that. There's no upper legal limit. There is, so it's mostly a policy decision for the council.
Thank you.
That.
So an example of this fee, I have two examples here. One is Ruli's Cafe that have chairs and tables out on the sidewalk. They did, once the fee was suspended, they did approach us to put their tables and chairs back out on the sidewalk. And the exhibit they provided shows it takes up about 140 square feet. So this is a photo taken today that shows their arrangement. At the fee as it is adopted right now, that 140 square feet. In the table below, I put everything on an annual basis for comparison. So that would be an annual fee of $6,720 for the space that they have taken up. And then as we showed in the table previous to this, some of the other jurisdictions that have subsidized the rental of the public space. Some have done a 50% reduction, and others where there's no encroachment into parking and there's no parking loss have gone down to a 75% reduction. So just to look at what numbers would be, I've shown what the fee for the Ruley arrangement would be if you were to direct us to come back to revise the fee to allow a 50% reduction or a 75% reduction. So that drops it to 3,360 on an annual basis, or the lowest, if you were to do the 75% fee reduction, drops it down to 1,680.
So the top one is based on $4 a square foot, the 50% is $2 a square foot, 75% is $1 a square foot.
Correct.
Got it.
And then the next is Pico's. So Pico's did establish their outdoor dining before the fee was suspended. So they have actually paid the $600 a month. So again, similar, they're 150 square feet. Pico's are looking at 140. Again, it's roughly the size of a parking space. So their numbers are very similar also. And again, I've just shown under those three scenarios, keep as is, or a 50% or a 75% reduction. And then overall, this is the exhibit that shows where parklets were during COVID, or people that approached us and they were interested in a parklet, but they ultimately didn't pursue one. So in this exhibit here, there's 9 locations. And there's a little key on here that shows the ones that have the X next to them, those are on the side streets. So that's part of the other conversation is under the old adopted policy, they were on-street dining was restricted to Magnolia only, but subsequent to your direction at the last meeting to expand the area, we could potentially look at on-street dining at these 3 locations. That's the Left Bank and Farmhouse, and I believe Silver Peso were also at one point looking at doing some service on the side street.
Do we know if they're still interested in, I mean, it's been a year now, 2 years since the parklets were pulled up.
Yeah, we've reached out to most. I know Left Bank are interested. They're looking at either Magnolia or the side street. But they wanted to wait through the winter, and it would be a spring thing for them if they wanted to move forward. And then
But we still have the property owner requirement, must be approved by the property owner requirement. That hasn't
Correct.
gone away, so,
yes.
okay.
And then some of the others, based on the timing and when the fee was dropped and being winter, have not pursued it. And so I don't know how many of these 9 would come back if we were to adjust or lower the fee. They were all 9 were notified of the meeting tonight. So we
Okay.
may have some folks in attendance that may be able to provide some feedback on how the fee weighs in on their decision to have a parklet or not.
So I have a quick question, Julian, on just your cases here of Ruley and Pico. I mean, one really fundamental difference is that the Ruley calculation involves no parking spot, right? That's merely using sidewalk and.
Correct.
Okay, and I think, I guess earlier policy, we didn't make that distinction. We just said that it would be $4 a square foot wherever, public
Yeah,
in
we
the
said it
right
would
of
be
way
the
was-
market rate for what retail space was. We didn't differentiate whether that was
Okay.
going to be in the street or on the sidewalk.
Okay.
However, your policy does state that the dining has to be next to the establishment. So you could, in essence, have the entire sidewalk and a little bit of the parking covered with outdoor dining, as long as you left enough of the parking space to have your ADA walkway by
Right.
there. So even though your policy says it's on sidewalk dining, there is a way that somebody could configure the dining in their space that would encroach into a parking space and then have to bypass kind of on the outer part of the parking space. And so it would eliminate a parking space.
Which is
What Pecos
that's
have
the
done.
different
Pecos-
Pico did do that
Yes,
really did
so
not.
they
do
have
that.
the bypass. The dining is not technically in the parking space, and their calculation is based on the area that the chairs and the tables are taking up. It's not based on the parking space that's lost.
And what's the threshold? Like, how far would Rulies have to go out until public safety required parking space to be used for the sidewalk? to go in?
Yeah, what we're looking for is is to maintain a 5 foot width of
Okay.
sidewalk, which is kind of adequate for two people to pass going in opposite directions on the sidewalk.
Okay.
If there's a tree or a street light, you're allowed to go down to less than that as an ADA pinch point, but we like to maintain the main thoroughfare past the business at least 5 feet in width.
Thank you.
So when we looked at the downtown area that we would envision that folks might come in and want to expand their operations to the outdoors for their dining. We looked at this zoning map for the city and noted that the storefront and the garden downtown kind of encapsulated what many folks would refer to as the downtown. And so that does go up the side streets ward a little bit, that would allow some of those other establishments that don't have frontage or don't want their dining to be on Magnolia to be part of the parklet program. So that's one option for you to expand the eligibility beyond just Magnolia. So that's the end of the presentation. So again, we're looking for your feedback so that we can come back to you and draft at a public hearing an amendment to our fee schedule to amend that fee. And again, we've shown you some options in here, and we're just kind of using that $4 a square foot because it's kind of an even number to work with if you want to look at 50% or 25%, or if you wanted to make a distinction that yes, if it impacts parking, it's more appropriate that a lesser discount is provided. And then also to hear your thoughts on if you think it's suitable to have those zoning districts as the eligible area for outdoor dining.
Okay, great. We also had the conversation back in November, I believe it was, about encroachment permits. Was that separate now, or are those are working out okay?
So the policy requires all the businesses to have an encroachment permit. So that transfers the liability.
Right.
And there's an administrative cost that goes along with that. That's a one-time thing. That's part of the policy. The rental fee is part of that whole process. But all of these encroachments would require a permit.
Okay. So bring it back to the council first. So this is for tonight. We're not making a vote on a specific policy resolution, but to give direction and then have a public hearing with this later. But I would like to acknowledge we do have a few public comments that have been submitted online for those who are interested in that. And they are published on our online. And I would also like to acknowledge that we have had this conversation in November with a tremendous amount of public comment at the time in person and online also. So if you want to reference that, anybody who's interested, that was at the November meeting, I believe, right before Thanksgiving. So I'd like to bring it back to us for some questions. First, Councilmember Carroll, are there any questions you have of the staff report?
Yeah, I'm just curious, is before you bring this back, will you be notifying both the restaurants and retail merchants by mail that it will be coming back? And the date that it will be coming back. I'm just want to make sure everybody is properly notified.
Can you speak to the notice, please?
Yes, when it comes back, it'll be part of a public hearing, so there is a noticing portion of that I believe is at least 10 days before we will notice. And we have the list of the downtown businesses. So they will be noticed once we have a public hearing set for the fee amendment.
And we're talking the downtown businesses, but do we have any retailers in our other jurisdiction, our other shopping and dining jurisdictions that this would apply to at this point?
We haven't had any reach out,
Okay.
at least to Public Works, to my knowledge.
Any questions?
No, I mean, I think my main feedback, not so much a question, is, you know, the fee amendments, feedback from the council. I would say that it would be good to discuss the benefit of keeping the parking at $4 and then perhaps going down 50 or 75% on the sidewalk, because I think that's one of the lessons learned from what happened in November. And then for the second issue of allowable dining locations, I know there was a lot of discussion about this in 2022, and we had, come to the conclusion we would only do it on Larkspur, but I'm not sure if I see the reasons for that. Ward Street to me seems completely acceptable. So I'm inclined to go there, but I'm happy to hear from the public or from other council members.
Okay, if there are no further questions from us at this time, I'd like to open it to the public for public questions or comments. And if you have one, please come to the microphone, introduce yourself and fire away.
Claire Paquette. So I really honestly just have a math question. So I read there was an attachment on the agenda online.
Are you hearing
and
that okay back there? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Are
sorry.
you hearing it okay? Okay.
And I saw that when Pico applied for the 2 parklet scenario previously, it was measured at 450 square feet and it was $1,800 a month. And then when I see sorry, that was Emporio Ruli, was $1,800 a month at 450 square feet. And then the Pico is also 2 parking space impact, but only had a $600 a month. Can you? I don't think I understand the price difference.
Yeah, so the scenario for the parklet that was in Port Ruli was for a parklet that would have been out in the street taking up the entirety of the parking spaces, or it would have been the entirety of the sidewalk, and then the bypass would have been out in the parking spaces. For Pico, even though there's 2 parking space lost, the sidewalk there is much narrower, and their actual calculation and the square footage they're paying for is based on the area that the tables and chairs cover. It's not based on the loss of the parking space. So even though it's almost 2 spaces in length, because there's a little taper at both ends. And then they own a little bit of the outdoor space outside the front of their building too. So it's the measurement is based on the actual amount of outdoor dining space. It's not measured on the loss of parking space.
It's complicated also in this historic downtown because we need to have enough clearance for accessibility for ADA and wheelchair accessibility when we often have unusual sidewalk and tree and bench configurations. So,
But sorry,
sure.
Mayor, if I can ask, but that kind of complicates if we tried to create a 2-tiered system, we're not charging for the loss of parking. So we couldn't say $4 per square foot for parking and $1 for loss of dining unless that were somehow structured in as a condition.
So I think the fee is based on it's the rental, it's the space that they're using. The area of the parking that's lost is not taken into account in that calculation, other than if you were to go with a two-tiered system, the trigger would simply be, do you lose a parking space or not? And that would differentiate between which rent it would be. The area of that parking space is not anything that's taken into account in
Which is-
actual rent.
Which is what Mill Valley does, right? So they actually say, we're gonna do 150% of what that parking area space is.
But they
Right.
have meters
Yeah,
too.
ours is.
Correct, which is
So,
as a
yeah,
calculation.
what we're presenting to you is just a checkbox. Yes, no, is there a loss of parking space? And if the checkbox is yes, then it would be tier one. And if the checkbox is no,
Got it.
then it would be tier two. That's how we're presenting it, but
Yeah.
you know, there's obviously there's other ways to measure all of these things, but for us, the cleanest, because they're renting the space on the sidewalk for the dining, was to actually measure that space.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comment in the chambers? Okay. If there's no additional public comment online, we're not doing. So at that point, then if there's no additional public comment, I'll bring it back to us for discussion. Any other reflections on this, Councilmember Carroll, that you'd like to start with, or?
I didn't want to speak for the city attorney. But I've been questioned by a couple of people about this, so I thought I should mention it, and that is that it does not apply to Bon Air Shopping Center or Larkspur Landing Circle, because their sidewalks are not in the public right of way.
Right.
Not affecting Larkspur Landing Circle or Sir Francis Drake. And as long as they're complying with ADA requirements as to access to the stores, they're free to pretty much do whatever they want. And I've been asked the question, so is that okay answer, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, Councilmember Carroll, this program is applicable only to city sidewalks, not to private sidewalks. And in addition, as the Public Works Director stated, and the council has sort of highlighted through questions, the program only applies currently to specific areas of public sidewalks. So what's happening on private sidewalks internal to private property is not subject to this, and they do, as you noted, have to comply with ADA and state standards. If there was a violation of those and the city was informed about it, the city would treat it as a code enforcement matter and intervene with the property owner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I could, I'm curious, from the comment, I'm thinking about North Magnolia. And is that the same as Bon Air and Larkspur Landing? Because, some of the stores up there, Renault Thai and Turnos, I mean, they have sometimes used the space. And I'm wondering if it's, again, owned by the retail lot owner, or if any of that's public. Just as a matter of
That's a
confirming. allowable-
complicated question, because some of the shopping centers in North Magnolia, the public right of way encroaches into the property. And we have to we should be using the term public right of way, not sidewalk, to draw that distinction. Whereas some of the other shopping centers, the public right of way is not on the property. So it almost had to be a discussion property by property. However, separate and apart from this program and not part of us charging a rental fee for our public right of way, you can't just spill into your parking lot and take away required parking. So those businesses that are still being allowed to be in their parking lots, private parking lots, do need to work out with the planning department that arrangement to make sure it's still allowable, given they're giving up parking spaces. Separate comment, different issue.
Okay, I didn't want to complicate tonight's discussion, but just, since the question for guidance on allowable locations, I want to make sure we're not omitting something that might come up later.
Okay.
I don't think we have anywhere else in town that this particular issue is needed right now.
Okay.
If we hear requests, we'll come back.
So in the staff report, we've been asked three things. One is, do we not amend the fee schedule and keep the outdoor dining fee at the market retail rate? Number two is to amend the outdoor dining fee to discount outdoor dining fee by a fixed percentage, a 50% reduction, which would result in $2 a square foot. Or number three, which is to amend the outdoor dining fee to discount dining fee on a tiered basis, and that would be either $2 a square foot at a 50% reduction or $1 a square foot at a 75% reduction. My thoughts go back to the November meeting where we had lots and lots and lots of people here in the audience and calling in, and writing in, very much talking about the community of Larkspur and the vibrancy that is brought by having outdoor opportunities for gathering together and for dining and for sitting outside. And I think it's marked by our earlier discussion, which was an actual community survey in which that was rated very high, that the lifestyle that people feel here is very high and would like to encourage more of that. We do not, we do have an obligation for the public right of way in a public policy way to if a business is using the public right of way, there is an obligation to, I believe, compensate the public for the use of that space, but we don't have to compensate at a tremendous amount. And so I am very interested in making this a minimal charge, as minimal as possible. And I like the suggestion of the $1 a square foot as a minimal amount that we could go forward with. And I'd like to see if my other council members are also interested in this amount.
So, Mayor Way, you're talking about the number three.
Number three.
Yeah.
I believe we do need to have a public policy
The
of
tier.
of a private business using the public right of way, but does not, to me, need to be a dollar amount that is difficult for that community member to reach, but is an amount that the public has a need for.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I'm in agreement. I think especially for 3B and then 3A, I would have thought $4, but $2 is fine. We really do see a lot of interest and demand in outdoor dining.
How are you with that number, Kevin?
My only I have two concerns. One is a higher rate for the taking away of parking spaces, I think is almost mandatory, because in that survey, two of the big concerns was maintaining the historic district and parking in downtown, that the community already has concerns about. So that's a concern of mine. And second is non-dining outdoor spaces, how that would be regulated. And those are my two areas of concern, whether the community would want that component other than on special occasions like the wine tour, or if the chamber wanted to hold an outdoor sales day downtown. They've done that on 4th Street in San Rafael and the West End, but not allowing it on a regular, weekly basis or daily basis.
Well,
So
I think we do have policies for intermittent encroachment policies, don't we, Julian, for, let's say, a sidewalk sale or something like that, where there is an encroachment. That is just a temporary encroachment. Don't we have policies already for that?
Yeah, those are covered by one-off temporary
One-offs.
encroachment permits. This is.
Well,
the-
my concern was in the report, it mentions expanding this, same as the outdoor policy with, for retail merchants. And I'm not really sure, one, how many retail merchants would be interested in that, given the smash and grab type robberies that have occurred over the last year or two. And so it may be opening up a hornet's nest that, really doesn't need to exist. And so I'd be interested in what the retail non-dining merchants felt about it. If there was an overwhelming demand for it, or if the majority or super majority just don't want to get involved in it.
Well, I think if we do get a request by downtown merchants who are non-dining to have additional outdoor space, we can deal with it at the time. At this point, I don't think there has been an interest in that now that most of the retailers have returned to indoor service areas because of the COVID restrictions having been lifted. But I think today we're narrowly focused on the dining to the fee schedule. So am I clear on that, that we're just really focused on the dining outdoor?
Yeah, when the policy came to you and it was adopted, we based it on the Novato model and a lot of the standards and requirements that were in there. And one of the items that was in there was this does not extend to retail other
Mhm.
than on an individual basis. They would be looked into further. And that it was mainly it was setting the parameters for the outdoor dining. Anything beyond outdoor dining will be a case by case basis and may have to come back for review. And that it was not the intent that it would set up permanent retail sales outside of shops in the area. If there were other reasons that a retail shop wanted to use the sidewalk, that may be something that could be permitted, but it wasn't in the Nevada policy that we based ours on. It was not the intent that this would lead to outdoor permanent retail sales.
And to speak to his question of Pico and the parking spots being used, you referenced that is a very unusual sidewalk configuration in front of that building, which has led us to create that exception, which was to bring parking onto the sidewalk with a bypass into the street level. Is that the way you would explain it?
Well, the Pico one is a little unusual because they actually their property line comes out into the sidewalk a little bit. And the sidewalk is narrower than the block where Ruli's is. And there's some trees that are there that complicate if you were to put all the parking out in the parking space. And so I think that was one of the reasons why the direction with the policy was keep all of the tables and chairs closest to the
For safety.
establishment and then have the pedestrian way on the outside.
Okay, it sounds like, do we feel like your questions were answered?
Oh, yeah, absolutely
okay.
about the retail, but I still have questions about reducing the rate 50% if parking spaces are taken. I think 50% without taking parking spaces is reasonable. But I'm leaning towards the full $4 for the taking away of parking, given the concerns our residents have about both the historic district and the downtown parking situation that was in the survey. But those are my concerns.
Would you mind lowering your hand then, and then I can,
Right.
wait, and then that's okay, because then I've watched that to make sure I called on you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further comments of yours?
Yeah, I think, so we're going to have a public hearing.
We are gonna have a
Yeah,
public
so we don't
hearing.
have to decide, but if I were just to do my gut feel, I think 3B, 75% reduction sounds really reasonable. And I think I'm a little bit more with Councilmember Carroll, thinking that the, keeping 3A at $4 a square foot seems like a better plan, but I'm open to hear what the public says.
Would we have trouble with application of that if we had two different fee schedules based on square footage that uses a parking parking space and square footage that doesn't? Because
No. So to me, it's the fee schedule is going to have the two tiers and it's going to be based on the square footage of the dining area. And it would be, from what I'm hearing, it would be set at $1 a square foot. However, if there is a parking space impact with that outdoor dining, then the rate would be $4 a square foot. Again, it's not going to say $4 and $1. It's going to say the market rate or 25% of the market rate. But for us, it's just a checkbox as to whether there's
Right.
parking impacted or not, whether we charge $4 or $1. If that's
So so to clarify on page 3, if we adopted 3A and B the way we just said, Rulies would be 1680. And Pico.
Per year.
Per year, and Pico would be 7,200. So that's if we did 3A is $4 a square foot and 3B is $1. So the
No,
formula.
50% reduction would be less than that on.
No,
on
I'm saying
3B.
3A would be not reduced. It'd be $4 a square foot. And that's my, preference, but again, I'm open to changing it. But just as a point of clarification, if 3A were 4 and 3B were 1, then, Rulies would be charged 1680 and Pico would be charged 7,200.
Seems pretty disproportionate to me.
True. And that's only
Yeah.
because Pico is using a parking spot. We're not doing it to favor a business. It's just we're
Right.
trying to disincentivize the use of parking space. That's the intention of that price tiering. And to, anyone who just wants like a little bit of, some sidewalk openness, as long as they have the 5-foot berth, width there, they have a very minimal fee.
My concern with disincentivizing use of a parking space is that we don't have, we don't have meters, so we don't actually have a way of valuing that particular parking space by way of its revenue generation, because we don't have any benchmark in which to do that. Are you nodding? Because am I correct with that? Or, I mean, if we had a downtown San Anselmo where there was a parking spot that they could monitor how much that parking spot was utilized, we really don't know utilization of a parking spot because we don't have any metrics in which to do that.
Right. It's similar to, there's some subsidy, there's some public benefit that you're recognizing with outdoor dining, and you're applying a subsidy, whether it's 25% or 50% or 75% to that. You would be making that same converse determination with the parking loss, saying there's a public benefit to the outdoor dining, but there's a public disbenefit
Yeah.
to losing parking. And so these are the numbers that we're going to assign to that. And you're right, we don't have data for that. We don't have data to assign a dollar figure or percentage number to the benefit of outdoor dining, just like we don't have a study that says what the loss is
Right.
of losing parking. So.
And the number seems pretty disproportionate. So 6,700 versus the 1,600 seems pretty disproportionate when we don't have the data to actually show that that particular parking spot contributes that much utilization because we don't have a parking meter. So I don't know. I think the public policy is that we want to encourage the community gathering, the place for people to dine, the place for people to be outdoors who are still feeling hesitant to be indoors because of the very viruses that are there. And from all the public comment we had in November, it was a huge public benefit to have these spaces. And I believe that outweighs a potential parking lot, parking space.
So question for you, Mayor, then would you say that as written, a 50% reduction, would be enough of a disincentive? So $2, then that would mean Rulies would be paying 1680 and Pico would be paying 3,600. Or would you?
I would just go with all of them the same
Okay.
at the encroach. I think we have a public policy responsibility that a private business that uses a public right of way has to, the public has to receive some benefit for that. But it doesn't have to be extraordinary. And I think $1 is a nominal fee. And I don't think it's I think it's a little disproportionate to because we don't have any data supporting the costs of the spot to try to differentiate those two. I mean, we're not talking 50 different businesses. We'll never have 50 different businesses. We're talking really less than 5, probably 2, maybe 3. I mean, that are going to be utilizing this. And I think it's a manageable amount that we keep it at a very nominal fee. That's my.
Okay. I mean, I'm, you're right. We don't have exact data, but my guesstimate is we could lose 5 parking spots. And I'd just be curious to hear the public at this point. I mean, I think, if we did, so it almost sounds like your preference is to do number 2 with a 75% reduction.
No,
So there's
mine
no
is
tier.
3B, which is just $1.
Correct, but two is actually, there's no tier. You're saying do
Yeah,
it with no
that's
tier.
consistent.
So you really want two with a 75%.
75% reduction.
Gotcha. And I'm saying I prefer the three, even if it's 50, 75, but that's just maybe the difference.
And Kevin?
Yeah, no, I'd just point out, no, we don't have meters, but we do have time limited parking downtown, which we're just supposed to be starting to enforce. And so by not having, by Gabe's estimate, 5 spaces, that's roughly a turnover of 5 cars per day. 25 people that aren't going to be able to park on Magnolia or the side streets to go shop or dine, for that even matter. So I think it does, which of course affects our sales taxes. So it does have an economic effect. That's why the limited time parking was put in the downtown area, was to turn over those spaces so that people could come downtown and run their errands.
But I think I need to clarify something, and that is we are not allowing parklets, which are, so you said 5, meaning that there's anticipation that there may be 3 additional ones, let's say in front of Emperor Ruli. But we are still have a no parklet policy. So that those 3 additional parking spots would not be encroached upon. The only exception that we have is because the sidewalk configuration in front of Pico is just not conducive with a safe way of not of having sidewalk and dining access without taking over parking, from what I understand. But we're not suddenly having parklets, so we're not going to be enhancing, taking away more parking spots.
But I think maybe we can, one
Can you
thing,
clarify that? We're not adding
Yeah.
parklets.
We're not adding parklets, but for example, if Ruli's came back and said instead of the exhibit we gave you that said we only want 4 feet of the sidewalk, now we've decided we actually do want the whole width of the sidewalk, then they would have to construct a walkway out in the parking spaces to go around the sidewalk, and then you would lose the 3 parking spaces.
and at that cost, they probably.
So you wouldn't be building a parklet out there, but you could technically, if they decided they wanted to use the entire width of the sidewalk and push the walkway out to the parking spaces, then you would lose parking spaces.
And one other point of clarification isn't the right of way in front of Ruli's the unusual one in having additional width, and most do not have that full width.
That is, that's probably the widest of the sidewalks in
So
the
it's
downtown.
converse of what you're saying. So the other ones, if they try to do what Ruli's do, would have to take a parking
Yeah.
spot. So I think, again, I'm open to, I've stated my piece, but I'm curious because I've heard, as much as I agree with you, the quality of life of outdoor dining, the European thing, I'm very into that. I've heard so many residents talk about parking. I just don't want to leave that, and the tiered system seemed to be a reasonable compromise from what I see.
So does this sound okay when you come back? We have 2 options. So, or one option would be amend the outdoor dining fee to just the 75% reduction to $1 per square foot as option A. And option B, that we could all debate again, would be the 50% reduction with use of parking space. Or are we?
So that would mean we would bring 2 resolutions to you for consideration. I assume, Sky, we can structure it that way.
Sky?
See,
His thumbs up.
because I'm hearing,
I was having trouble with my mute button. I'm sorry. Can you, and I just want to make sure I'm actually understanding at this point. It seems to me like we're talking about just a single rate, but maybe I've lost the thread of the conversation.
I thought we were talking about a single rate, but it sounds like we actually are still debating whether there should be a single rate which applies to sidewalk encroachments on the public right of way versus a separate rate, which would be for encroachment into a parking space and a sidewalk. Do you want to clarify that, city manager? Or are we spinning our wheels out of control?
I
here?
was going to suggest that we could bring those both to you for the public hearing, and
Okay.
you could then hear from the public.
Okay.
That
And
would
just to be clear, it's from page 2 of the staff report. It seems like if we just, give them a name, Mayor Way's thought was using number 2 with a 75% reduction. And, Gabe's was using number 3 with I'll go exactly as written. I had said, I prefer A to B, 0 reduction, but I'm willing to be flexible and say 2 and 1, because you're right, it doesn't.
Okay,
create
I
as big-
see that.
So those I think are the ones that I'd love to hear public feedback and council deliberations. I don't know about Councilmember Carroll, if you think that there was another one, but I thought we were kind of on the same page about number 3.
Oh, no, mine is number 1 on that page for
Oh,
parklets.
What-
Anything that impedes into the roadway, I want to charge the $4. And then
Well,
I have no problem with the reductions for ones that don't, but I think, again, going back to the survey we just heard, those 2 considerations. One is the appearance of the downtown historic district, and to a lesser degree, the complaints about parking in the downtown. So I think it's an important issue to the residents. I do, of course, want to hear from the merchants, but I think we got feedback from the non-dining merchants that they hated parklets because it cut down on particular senior citizen access to their business. I remember those comments quite clearly. And so that's why I feel it should be number 1. And then the alternatives, I would not oppose, would be those ones listed below it in number 3, I think it was.
so we generally, in these kind of giving direction, like to get a consensus, but we really have a quorum now of 3 tonight. And so it appears that 2 out of the 3 are interested in what Councilmember Paulson referred to as the 2 options to bring back to us. So and I think that's the majority of the 3 of us at this point. I would prefer that. I would compromise to that, although I'm more directed towards the 75% reduction. But I think this still remains to be an issue that we are wrestling with. So would that sound okay for staff to bring back those 2 options, since that 2 out of 3 of us want those 2 options?
Yeah, we will bring something back structured that we can work with that on the evening of the public hearing.
And
Yes.
what is the feedback then at this point that will come at the next meeting? Or hopefully soon? So for our merchants, what if they ask us where we stand, it's still status quo for where they are right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Still status quo. We would like to get this in place because as the weather gets better,
Yes.
we're gonna get interest. So tentatively the next meeting, but staff meets every week to study the load of items coming. And March looks pretty busy, so I haven't figured out if the second meeting in March is a better choice yet.
Okay, so we're still in a holding pattern about this. And I also just, if there are additional restaurants that are interested in having in outdoor dining and using the public right away, I just want to remind them that we had agreed that the property owner of that building in which they are leasing or using it needs to have approval. So that was a very big concern of the parklet that was in front of Left Bank a number of years ago. So okay, sounds like we have a little bit of a consensus. And thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
That brings us to business item 8.2, appointment to the Larkspur Planning Commission. First of all, I would like to thank the 7 members of our community who applied for a vacant spot on the Planning Commission. We conducted interviews last meeting prior to the regular council meeting, and it was Councilmember Paulson and Councilmember Carroll who conducted those meetings. Mayor Candell needed to recuse himself for business-related reasons. So I just want to thank everybody for doing that and really encourage the continued community's support for participating and volunteering on these very important committees. I tell people that probably setting the direction and the course for what the lifestyle and the community of Larkspur is really the city council that sits up here. And then next to in public policy, to me, is planning commission, because they help decide the direction of what we build or don't build and where our community design goes. So it's very important to apply for that. We had some great candidates. We had a few who stood out, and I was wondering if I could open that discussion to Councilmember Paulson if he had any suggestions.
Yeah, so I want to echo what Mayor Way just said, that, it was really heartening to see. I think we had a planning commission interview session the year before that, and we had very few candidates, and it was a lot of people and a lot of strengths. One candidate in particular stood out to me for length of tenure. I know this person has been involved for at least 4 years that I've been involved, and then going, before that, another 4 years. So I sort of wanted to put forth the name of Tamara Hull as having reread and rethought the interviews, as someone who has maybe been involved in the most things, and, also has a skill set, in finance and others that would be very helpful.
Councilmember Carroll, do you have any
Yeah,
comments?
I agree. There were a couple of candidates that stood out more than the others, and quite frankly, the one that impressed me the most was Jonathan Shambroom. His service on the library board, given his other volunteer work and involvement with the community, quite frankly, he stood out for me.
Well, I think I can agree with you on that. I think those Tamara and Jonathan did stand out for me also. I appreciated that. I'm leaning more towards Tamara because of her many years of expressing interest in planning commission and this being the right time, and also her long-term interest in running for city council, and has actually pulled papers and previously, but it wasn't the right time for her at that point. But I really believe this would be a great opportunity for her to learn that role, if should she consider it in the future to run for city council. So I would like to put forward her name also.
Okay.
All right. So it sounds like we are grateful for the individuals who applied, and we have some consensus that we had some great choices, and Tamara Hull will has received most of our affirmation. So can I take a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Allison, could you do a roll call?
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes on Tamara Hall.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes. And we will be reaching out, and Allison will be reaching out to the candidates and thanking them, and also extending our best wishes and thank yous to them for applying and considering opportunities in the future. And we will also be reaching out to Ms. Hull to tell her our decision. So at that point, we have reached the end of our agenda, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.